Looking next to the area of literacy and these students, there are several reasons that this is kind of a very widespread group. There are kids that this might never be the primary focus is literacy, and there are individuals with AAC that it would absolutely still be target area. Um, just like some other things we've discussed, many parents of children with disabilities initially place more value on their physical needs and just their basic communication than on literacy. And understandably, first things first. So, all that early intervention is focused on different things, other things that typically developing kids we don't have to focus on. So, we can start to focus on those literacy components. These kids, they're just working on basic, physical and communication needs. And so, it's different for them. They very much can still have involvement and should have involvement in literacy activities. Symbols can be programmed for them to participate in a class story. They can use theme pages to sort vocabulary into groups with pictures before reading the story. So that could be on a device or just with paper. Symbols. You can definitely get peers involved helping the AAC user form sentences about the story after reading the story on their device. That's a very natural way to not only have the student practice, but get peers involved and just kind of normalize the use of an AAC device. It's not so novel. They can be actual program responses into a device, a Big Mac button, those big red buttons or small red buttons. You can do so much with them. They're really easy to use. So personally, those are the kind of things I would use during story time because literally you flip a switch and you record something and flip it back and it's ready to go. But if you had this response, I thought the book was to where they could at least start it there or give potential answers to the story and then call on that student for that. I mean, there are so many ways, and I hope you get to see some ways modeled in your student teaching or just throughout your career because it seems overwhelming, but as soon as you're in it and using it, it's very intuitive. It's very fun actually to use. So there are all kinds of ways. Just get them on the carpet. Make sure they're on the carpet. And then suggested strategies for writing. There are specific story writing software available. And, when we're talking about, again, older adults that are cognitively average or above, I've heard them speak at conferences. I mean, it's through their device, but they can write speeches and deliver speeches. And so, there is software and programming that makes that much easier if they're much more skilled in that area we're not doing one word at a time, if that makes sense. Because it'd be very laborious. So there's even more programs for those that would apply to where they can write much more intuitively through an AC device. So it's really cool. And honestly, this stuff is changing all the time, and it's a very exciting area. Oftentimes, school districts, especially smaller school districts, don't have a specific assistive technologist employed. They might have an AAC team that they pull together anytime this actually comes up because it's rare. I would encourage you to consider learning more and being a part of that team because I think you would think it was really fun and really interesting. And it's a really important way to serve kids in a district. Um, this activity, if you want to go to AAC Literacy, this website, it is actually really a great resource for you because it's going to give you different, in this case, phonological awareness tasks, and it's going to give you research. And I want you to kind of familiarize yourself with it, not only to get started, but because I think it's a good resource for you to come back to. To be honest, as I'm recording it, I don't remember if you have to do this, if this is one of your assignments or not. So make sure you look in the instructional units folder to see if this was a required one for your participation points for this chapter or just a suggested one. Either way, it won't hurt you to do it. Then what are the outcomes? What do we see? This is the important thing, it's motivating that your work will be worth it. Does the student increase his or her communication ability? When it's done with fidelity, most studies, or 86%, show positive outcomes for their overall improvement of communication. That's a great outcome. Now, we can't say that for sure with your student. You would be responsible for taking data and making sure that they're around that average, but it is very much possible. This is that other area, these bottom two, that are a big hang up, understandably, in getting started, is understanding this outcome. Are there any effects on other areas of functioning? Primarily, if my child uses this system you're suggesting, won't that keep them from talking? 90%, 9 out of 10 AAC users increase their spoken language as well. And I would posit that it's actually higher than that, but some people just will never have the physical capability to speak. Someone with cerebral palsy that might be able to get their vocal cords together to vocalize, but they're never going to speak in words. So that's also in this group. So most kids, if they have the physical capacity to use verbal language, they will eventually. The other hang up, though, is that the what do I want to say? They worry about how others will view their loved one, and I can relate to that. You just do not want to watch a loved one struggle. And so I think what we have to learn how to say in the most kind and empathetic way is that most likely the world is already viewing them a specific way if they can't communicate with them like they're expecting to. Especially if that child has disruptive behavior as a result of not having adequate communication, available to them. So overall, it's only going to improve their ability to communicate, and it's going to improve peer acceptance. And even now, because everything's more prevalent, especially when you have that child that's using an iPad, people won't even think twice about that because iPads are kind of everywhere. So with the increase of technology, some of these stigmas have been reduced. Think about, which is probably hard for you considering you're all young, or most of you, I'm sure. There was a time when no one was carrying around a computer or a phone, and so they would have felt like their child or loved one would really stand out. And so it's still an area of concern, not near as big as it used to be. The biggest one overall is that spoken language. And so just feel confident in helping them understand, nope, actually, I think this is going to help. And we'll continue to encourage that alongside of this communication system. Lastly, I wanted to share this YouTube video with you guys. I went to a conference in Ohio, and I heard this key speaker. It was this beautiful Brazilian woman stood up, and I'm thinking, whoa, where'd she come from? Because, hey, I want to think that special educators are good looking, but I'm just saying, she was out of place. I'm thinking, who is this? And she gets up and starts talking, and she just happens to be this filmmaker from Brazil that had a son born with a disability. And she tells her story. Let me just tell you, I was bawling by the end of it. She actually created this video, this movie, and that's won all these small awards. But this is after her own son named Ian, whom part of her story during that conference was not only helping him get his physical abilities addressed, because he had physical disabilities, but his communication, because for a long time they thought he couldn't, or like he did not have the IQ to communicate. And then through this amazing story she tells, they realize he can, and she gets him a Dynavox, and now he communicates fluently. And just to think this kid was almost trapped inside his own head because no one thought he could talk. So anyway, that's kind of how it ties into AAC. This particular little short isn't going to show him using AAC. It's just more about acceptance and inclusion. I think you can use this video in your classrooms to help kids, to help start a discussion, because we know it's not only about bringing individuals with disabilities to their peers, but bringing their peers to them. And she told stories, like, this is based off of her experience, because when she was first taking Ian to his therapy appointments, she would pass a school in the playground through a chain link fence. And she said she would just watch him look over to that playground with longing every day as she took him to his therapy. And so she created this video, and man, it is so good. I've showed it to everyone I can possibly, including my own kids. Um, so I hope it touches you. I think it can be a tool as you are educating others in your building, maybe for Disability Awareness Month, or just something you show other kids in your class, in your own special ed room, and have a discussion on what it really means to be included. So, this video is for you, and then I think that's the end of this lecture. So, as always, make sure you email me or set up a time to meet with me if you have questions. And I'll see you for chapter 16.